Welcome, friends of Middle-earth, to a tale rarely told, a mystery veiled in the shadowed lands beyond Mordor. Today we embark on a journey eastward, into the forgotten histories of Sauron's hidden legions, armies that never marched upon Minas Tirith, but whose presence loomed over the fate of the world. Who were these warriors? What secret allegiances did they forge with the Dark Lord? And what became of them after the War of the Ring? To understand these enigmatic forces, we must first return to the Second Age, when Sauron, still free of the One Ring's burden, ventured beyond the borders of Middle-earth known to elves and men. In the vast and distant lands of Rhûn and Khand, he wove his dark designs, binding the tribes of the East to his will. But these were not mere barbaric hordes, as Gondorian chroniclers would later depict them. They were cultures with their own histories, kingdoms that thrived under sun-scorched skies, and warlords who saw in Sauron a patron of power rather than a tyrant. One of the most infamous of these was the realm of Khand, home to the Variags. Feared by Gondor's soldiers for their swift cavalry and ruthless tactics, the Variags were among the few who never abandoned Sauron, even after his first downfall. But their loyalty was not born of fear alone. It was a pact of survival. For, in the wars of the Second Age, they found common cause against Númenor, the great sea empire that had begun its eastward expansion. To the Númenorians, these distant realms were lands to be conquered, but to Sauron, they were an untapped reservoir of warriors, eager to resist the might of the West. Beyond Khand lay the endless steppes of Rhûn, a land whose people were shrouded in deeper mystery. The Easterlings, as the Free Peoples named them, were not a single people but a vast tapestry of tribes, some nomadic, others ruling over settled cities. Among them were the Wainriders, whose war chariots thundered against Gondor's eastern borders, and the Balchoth, who nearly broke the realm of Rohan before being turned back at the Battle of the Celebrant. But these were merely the factions known to history. What of those who never took the western roads? What of the kingdoms that remained behind, ever watchful, ever loyal to the shadow? And so we must ask, what role did these hidden armies play in Sauron's greater design? Unlike the orcs, bred for war in the pits of Mordor, these were men, mortals, who fought for reasons beyond servitude. Did they believe Sauron to be a god? Were they promised dominion over the West in return for their allegiance? Or were they bound by darker pacts, perhaps even knowledge of the One Ring itself? As we delve deeper, we will uncover the whispers of history, of kings who knelt before the Dark Tower, of secret citadels in the farthest east, and of the forgotten fate of these armies after Sauron's fall. The tale is only beginning, and what lies ahead may change how we view the War of the Ring itself. In the days before the forging of the One Ring, Sauron's mastery over the East was not yet absolute. His emissaries, clad in dark robes and bearing gifts of power, moved through the courts of chieftains and kings, sowing seeds of allegiance with whispers of dominion. Some resisted, clinging to their ancient ways, but many saw in him a force greater than their scattered warbands, a lord who could unite them under a single banner. It was in this era that the Black Númenorians, Sauron's most devoted human servants, first ventured into the lands beyond Mordor, acting as his heralds and enforcers. The kingdoms of Rhûn, though hidden from the eyes of Gondor's historians, were not mere wilderness. Cities of towering bronze spires stood amidst the steppe, their rulers wielding iron-forged laws as well as steel. Among these, the tribe known as the Saggarth, spoken of in the Red Book of Westmarch, were feared for their warriors who bore crimson-painted shields. They were said to have bound themselves to Sauron through a ritual of blood, believing him to be the dark god returned from ancient prophecy. Their oaths were written, not in ink, but in the flesh of their enemies. But there were others too, nameless legions lost to time. It is known that Sauron, even before the War of the Last Alliance, raised temples in the Deep East, where men gave sacrifice in his name. What dark knowledge did he impart to those who called him master? Some have spoken of a breed of sorcerers, warlocks who commanded spirits of flame and shadow, taught in hidden sanctuaries far from the battles waged in the west. Could it be that even as Elendil and Gil-galad marched upon Mordor, Sauron had warriors yet unseen, waiting in lands untouched by the hands of elves and Dunedain alike? With the defeat of Sauron and the fall of Barad-dûr, his grip over the East did not vanish overnight. If anything, the chaos left in his wake only deepened the divisions among the tribes and kings who had once followed him. The Númenóreans, who had not perished in the downfall, continued their incursions into the East, seeking to bend its people to their rule, but they faced opposition from those who still clung to the old allegiances. Among them, the remnants of Sauron's priesthood wove their intrigues, preserving the doctrines of the Dark Lord in secret. By the time the Third Age dawned, Gondor and its allies had come to believe that the threat of the East had been contained. But this was an illusion, for Sauron had left behind something far more enduring than armies. He had planted the idea of conquest, the dream of a power beyond the petty feuds of kings. When he returned, calling himself the Necromancer and hiding in Dol Guldur, his agents were already at work beyond the Sea of Rhûn, rekindling the old flames of war. And so the question lingers. When Gondor clashed against the Easterlings at the Battle of the Plains, were they fighting mere warlords seeking plunder? Or had these armies been reforged in the image of Sauron's ancient legions, awaiting the return of their true master? The answer lies in the shadowed histories of the East, where Sauron's will never fully faded and where his hand still guided the course of war. The hidden armies of the Dark Lord were not only those that marched beneath his banner in the War of the Ring. They were the unseen forces, the remnants of a forgotten past, waiting in the dark corners of the world. And when Sauron called, they answered. But what became of them after his final fall? That is a question yet to be answered, and the truth may be darker than we dare imagine. With the destruction of the One Ring, the Dark Lord was undone. His spirit scattered into the abyss. The hosts of Mordor broke upon the fields of the Pelennor and the slopes of Mount Doom, their will shattered as the eye fell. Yet, beyond the ruin of Barad-dûr, past the lifeless wastes of Gorgoroth, the war did not end. In the east, where Sauron's word had been law for millennia, there were still armies that had not marched, still legions that had not laid down their arms. The question must be asked. What became of the Variags of Khand, the war chariots of the Balkoth, the hidden warrior priests of Rhûn? Did they scatter like wind-blown ashes, lost without the Dark Lord's command? Or did they linger in the shadows, waiting for a new master to rise? History speaks little of these distant lands after the fall of Sauron, for the scribes of Gondor turned their gaze westward, chronicling the triumphs of Elisar and the Fourth Age. Yet, remnants of lore hint at a far more unsettling truth. Messengers were sent east in the early days of the reunited kingdom, seeking parley with the chieftains of Rhûn and Khand. Few returned, and those who did spoke in hushed tones of kingdoms still ruled by fear, of warlords who would not bow to the king of the West. The shadow of Sauron may have passed from Middle-earth, but its imprint upon the hearts of men did not fade so easily. Among the most enigmatic remnants of the Dark Lord's power were the sorcerers of the East, whispered of in the unfinished tales. It is said that before his final fall, Sauron had dispatched his most trusted agents beyond the mountains, carrying with them relics of ancient power. Were these the last fragments of his will, meant to ensure that his dominion would never truly die? Some tales speak of the blue wizards, Alatar and Palandor, who journeyed into the east and were never seen again. Did they fall to Sauron's corruption, or did they seek to undo his influence in the distant lands where his shadow lay heaviest? And then there is the great and lingering fear, the possibility that Sauron's defeat was not absolute. For what is evil if not enduring? Morgoth, his master, was cast into the void, but even the Valar feared that his influence would seep into the world again. Sauron was lesser, yet he had learned from his master well. Did he, in his final moments, leave behind a seed of his will, hidden in the farthest corners of the world, waiting to take root once more? The hidden armies of the East may not have marched to the Black Gate, but their presence shaped the fate of Middle-earth as surely as any orc horde. They were the silent sentinels of Sauron's legacy, the unseen threat beyond the maps of Gondor and Arnor. Perhaps they remain still, lurking in forgotten lands, their banners furled but not burned, their swords sheathed but not discarded. Perhaps the War of the Ring was only the end of one battle, and not the last whisper of the Dark Lord's dominion. And so, as the Fourth Age dawns, Middle-earth stands upon the edge of a question it dares not ask. If Sauron's shadow has truly passed, why do the fires still burn in the east? The road of this tale has ended, but the journey into the unknown has only begun.